Welcome everyone to this discussion of CMI's 17th Annual LGBTQ Community Survey. The survey was conducted recently. Dave will talk in a moment about the demographics, but first, I'm Tom Roth, and I am the self-appointed president and founder of Community Marketing and Insights. And I'm going to introduce myself a little bit and how we approach our research. And then Dave and I will go a little bit back and forth as we review some of the key findings from this year's study. But first, this wouldn't be possible without our sponsors, and we really appreciate their involvement and support. First of all, Human Rights Campaign is back with us. The foundation does a lot of research on the LGBTQ community, which really benefits everybody involved in working with and supporting our community. Absolute is also back with us. Long time marketer and advertiser to the LGBTQ community. And as far as I understand, maybe the first national advertiser to our community, and still at it after all these years. So we couldn't be more appreciative of someone than we are of Absolute. And CMI Media is also back with us. CMI Media works with a lot of pharmaceutical companies and helps inform them about the issues that the general population faces and helps them craft their outreach. Even though our name is similar, we're unrelated. Just wanted to call that out. But yeah, CMI Media is back and they do some really great work, so we appreciate them as well. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going. As you may see in the chat, I've already included our link to download the report. If you're on your computer, you can download it to your hard drive, desktop or hard drive. And if not, then you can copy and paste it over to your computer. If for some reason the link doesn't work or you're on your phone, you can always request it by sending me an email, tom@cmi.info. And we'll take questions, time allowing, at the end. You can pop them into the chat and we'll flip through them after we're finished. Or if time does not allow, or you have something a little bit more proprietary or confidential, always feel free to email us, tom@cmi.info, david@cmi.info. So a little bit about us for the newbies in the group. We've been around since 1992. Yes, that's 30 plus years. We did not invent gay, but we have been around almost as long. We are 100% LGBTQ owned and operated. And I think that's important for suppliers who are interested in diversifying their supplier base as well as their customer base. And we are among the first NGLCC certified LGBTQ owned suppliers. So we've been doing this 30 years. It's consumer research, but it's also community research. Not just about buying stuff, but about health issues and financial issues and so forth. And we've conducted literally hundreds of studies across many industries, which also kind of makes us unique. We operate our own panel. It's our own proprietary panel of LGBTQ community members across North America. And that's what we tap into to produce custom studies. And our practice includes, as most researchers do, surveys, focus groups, virtual interviews, intercepts, and so forth, but entirely LGBTQ. And we serve a wide variety of corporations, which I'll call out in a moment, universities, organizations, and government clients across North America and around the world. These are just a few, literally maybe 5–10% of the clients we've had the great opportunity of working with over the past 30 years. I love my career. I've learned so much, and every day that we do our work, I learn and we learn, and it's fascinating. We've worked with probably about a third of our clients are in some form financial. About a third of our clients are in some form of tourism and travel. About a third of our clients are across a wide variety of media, pharmaceutical, services. We work with a lot of nonprofit organizations, which is really rewarding work. We work with government institutions as well. That just sort of touches on a few. And on our website, you'll find a lot more research to dive into, specific to your industry or not. You may not be in the automotive industry, but taking a look at that study will also deliver some insights that could be of interest to you as well. So I encourage you to use cmi.info as a good resource. So the way we produce this study, and Dave's going to talk a little bit more about our methodology, is we do it through partnerships. It's a win-win situation. We produce the survey, and we send the survey participation link out via numerous partners. They're LGBTQ media, events, organizations, apps, websites, influencers, etc. And that really helps diversify the participation so that we can confidently report on the LGBTQ community as well as important segments within LGBTQ. And this has been our formula for 17 years. It's worked great. And the partners also get data about their readers or their members or their attendees. So it really has been win-win. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dave to A, introduce himself, and B, tell you a little bit about how we approach putting the study together and what the results mean. Dave?
Great, thank you, Tom. And again, my name is David Paisley, and I'm the Senior Research Director here at CMI. I haven't been with the company for all 30 years, but I've certainly been here for 25 of those years. And I both sort of help our clients sort of develop the research projects and then coordinate our staff who actually implements the research projects. And as Tom may have mentioned, I think right now we've done about 500 research projects, all about LGBTQ. So it gives us a lot of background. And one thing I do like about the community survey is that we ask a lot of the same questions every year. So we've been able to track some of the changes and trends or not, as I'll talk about as time goes on. So Tom, next slide. So for this particular year, in 2023, for our 17th, we had 14,432 participants. This is the thing, though, what I would say about our participation for the community survey is a little different than our other research, is that it more heavily focuses on our media and organizational partners. And because of that, there's no sort of like controls of who comes in. If I do a research project just using our panel, it will be much more balanced by gender and age and ethnicity than we can get from the results of open links that are just out there with many community partners. So because of that, we do rate the results. What you may know is that if you are relying on community partners, especially within the media, your results will end up being far more male or cisgender man than perhaps you might find in the general population. So because of that, the results when we're working with media partners tend to be a little bit more men, maybe a little bit more older, might be a little bit more white. We weight the results a little bit so we get a more balanced approach to results. And we've been doing this right from the beginning, and it helps sort of stabilize the results over time. So this is our weighting assumptions. The weighting assumptions are that cisgender, gay and bi plus men are 44% of the sample. Cisgender, lesbian and bi plus women are 44% of the sample. Transgender and non-binary participants are 12%. We also report by age group, and this is how we weight the age groups, which is a 35% mix. You may ask why age 18 to 35 is lower. It's just because there are fewer number of years within that age group. So it's equally weighted per year over time for adults. And we weight results by race and ethnicity, and we base this on just general population US Census for adults in the United States, and that's how it sort of breaks down for adults. Interesting, when you look at the census, if you add, starting at 0, the percentage of white will be much less. But if we're just doing adults 18 or above, about 62% of the population is white. So this is how that just sort of reflects in the general population. So our goal here is not to say or define the different percentages that exist within the LGBT community. It's a philosophy to sort of reasonable equal weighting based on general population statistics, weighting cisgender men and women equally. The transgender and non-binary participants coming in about 12% is about what has been coming in lately, about 12%. The age is being weighted sort of equally by year of person's birth. And again, race and ethnicity is being weighted mostly based on Gen Pop statistics on race and ethnicity in the United States. So a little bit about understanding LGBTQ community demographics. All right, first thing I want to talk about is the type of living environment. I think the most important takeaway on this is that we live in all different types of communities. I mean, sometimes there's a stereotype that LGBT people are all in urban big cities. And as you can see here on the list, it's just not true. As a matter of fact, most of us do not live in urban big cities. There is some truth to the stereotype that cisgender gay and bi plus men are more likely to live in big cities. I mean, it's not overwhelming, but there's definitely some truth there. We've done a lot of tracking over the last 3 or 4 years about some of the demographic changes to see if there's been big LGBTQ migration to like smaller communities. Like there's been this big discussion about people leaving the big cities, especially during the COVID times, moving to the suburbs or rural communities, but we just haven't seen it in the LGBTQ community. When we really look at the type of community that people are living in, this has been pretty static from before COVID. Next slide. A little bit about LGBTQ friendly environments. We've asked this question for a long time, and we ask, do you live in an LGBTQ friendly city, town, or local community? And here, the vast majority of people, 83%, agree with this, about half split between strongly agree and somewhat agree. And that what tells me is that as a community, we do seek out environments that are going to be a little bit more safe. And that makes sense. I think everyone is seeking out environments that are a little bit more safe. So we may seek out cities or communities or neighborhoods that feel comfortable for us as LGBTQ community members. The next question is, do you live in an LGBTQ friendly state or province for our Canadian results? And here the results come in a little bit less. So if you were in a place like Texas or Florida, you may live in a state that you do not consider LGBTQ friendly, but you may live in a city like Miami or Fort Lauderdale or Houston or Dallas that is quite LGBTQ friendly, right? So some of us live in these sort of dual situations where our states are very hostile, but our local communities are very friendly. And the last question is, do you live in an LGBTQ friendly country? The strongly agree for the United States was only 5% this year, and only 40% either strongly agree or somewhat agree. And as we look down, we see that right now, 40% of USA residents agree that the United States is an LGBTQ friendly country, but that's fallen 15 points in the last 2 years. So that's pretty amazing. One thing that I find about these results over time is that they're pretty stable, even though we have people coming in from all these different media sources, and those media sources can change from year to year. They're, I'm gonna say, sort of like-minded. They're all LGBTQ media sources. And then also our weighting helps sort of smooth out results when there's this many people coming in. Excuse me. So the results don't tend to change for our questions that much unless something's happened. And something's happened. I mean, this has been a trend that's been going down over time ever since Obama got out of office. But the number of people that feel our country is LGBTQ friendly is plummeting. And it's down to actually 41% with rounding in 2023. But it's, again, a 15-point drop in 2 years. So things are not feeling so safe and comfortable in our country anymore. I also want to point out that while 40% of the LGBT residents agree the United States is a friendly country, that really contrasts to our Canadian participants, where 96% of Canadian residents agree that Canada is an LGBT friendly country. So again, those two numbers actually are getting wider apart over time, and that is unfortunate as a USA resident. We also do a little bit of break, and we look at the major states that have really good numbers coming into the survey if you feel your state's LGBTQ friendly. I think places like California or New York State, super high. I mean, 90% of the residents say that their states are LGBTQ friendly. If you look on the other side of this little thing, Florida and Texas, they're both in the same place, which is 16% of residents. But the big change over the last couple of years is that, unfortunately, Texas has always been viewed by their residents as a little bit LGBTQ unfriendly. Big change is Florida. The amount that the sentiment of Florida residents living in the state has really dropped. It dropped just 8% in this past year. It dropped comparably bad the year before. And now it's down to what I'll call Texas levels. So again, that's the big change that's happened, is that people who live in Florida are getting a little bit disillusioned with what's going on with their state politics, as they well should. Next slide. A little bit about relationship status. I'm not going to say about a lot here other than it's super stable. You know, in reviewing the community survey over the years, the marriage rates really do appear to be quite stable. The relationship status of a person that considers themselves married right now, a cisgender lesbian bi plus women is 38%, cisgender gay and bi plus women men is 28%, and trans and non-binary participants is 27%. Always over time, cisgender, lesbian, and bi plus women have always been more likely to be in a relationship, married and just in a relationship, than the men. And that actually has important implications because the reason people buy things and what they buy and how they buy it is often based on their relationship status. So the fact that there's these big gaps between cisgender men and women and the transgender community matters to some degree about what is being purchased and how it's being purchased. Because again, single people just approach being a consumer different than people who are in relationships. The marriage rates are super stable the last few years. How I interpret that is the number of new marriages right now in the LGBTQ community is getting offset by divorces or by deaths, but it's been super stable. Next slide. All right, a little bit about parents. Again, really stable statistics recently. So first of all, there are more LGBTQ parents than you might think. 22% of the participants indicated having a child of any age. And if we ask the question, which is more critical to marketers, is the percentage of children under age 18 living at home. Right now, again, cisgender, lesbian, bi plus women are far more likely to have children in the household than cisgender men. And trans and non-binary participants tend to be somewhere in between. But these percentages have been really quite stable over the last 5 years. So we're not seeing an LGBTQ baby boom, which many people predicted 5 years ago. We just never saw it in the statistics. It has inched up a little bit over time, but it's certainly not been a boom. And we're in a position right now that we're actually getting some rotation. Is that we've been doing this long enough that many of our parents who maybe had a child under age 18 as the child is now turned 18 and has now not in that period anymore. And they're moving to, I have children age 18 and over. And then new parents are being sort of rotated at about the same level as parents that their child are aging out because now being above age 18. So I think that's really interesting that we just, we didn't see the big baby boom after a certain growth that did happen about 10 years ago. And it's been quite stable since then. I also want to point out that 18% of LGBTQ baby boomers are grandchildren or grandparents. So they have grandchildren. A lot of this is actually people that were in opposite sex couples when they were maybe younger and then came out in the 70s or 80s, but they came out after being married or after having kids. And now they are grandparents. So this whole grandparent market is something that is largely unexplored. About the only people that have really explored it to date are a couple entities within the tourism industry, but it's not something that's been explored too much by most consumer marketing. Next slide. And a little bit about financial confidence. This is, again, a question we've asked all the time. The survey asked participants a multi-year tracking question about their economic confidence. In general, LGBTQ economic confidence is sort of neutral to slightly positive. Confidence levels are down 2% from last year, but however, that's within the margin of error. A couple of things I'll point about confidence is that, first of all, if you go on the right-hand side of the screen, this concept of better off in the next year. Younger people, age 18 to 34, are more confident right now than older people. And also sort of Black and Latinx community members are far more confident than Asian and white members right now. And that may have somewhat to do with things like the very low unemployment rate. We have seen salary escalation happen for a lot of people, especially in jobs where, say, younger people traditionally have been employed. So a lot of our community members are a little bit more confident this year, but it's a mixed bag. And we do ask this question about political tendency. It hasn't really changed, but politically, do you consider yourself to be? And this, we purposely don't ask the question Democrat or Republican, because I think people can be all over that question, but we ask it in the terms of very liberal, somewhat liberal, moderate, somewhat conservative, very conservative. And as you can see here is that our community trends quite liberal. That's probably no surprise here. And very few people in our community consider themselves to be conservative. And that would be hard today to consider yourself, maybe not conservative or fiscally conservative. I think when you ask this question, and we have done that for other clients, you'll find that there are a lot of people in the LGBTQ community that are very fiscally conservative. But what's happening with social politics today, I think makes it hard for many LGBTQ people to consider themselves to be conservative. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tom for the next section.
Yeah, so terminology is something that we touch base on every survey, and we do that for a reason. It changes every time we do a survey. When we first started asking the question about which terminology resonates with you, gosh, 15 years ago, Dave, I think that GLBT and gay and lesbian were pretty high up there. But of course, that's changed over time. We don't even ask about GLBT anymore because it's sort of frowned upon as antiquated. LGBT is okay, but far stronger and increasing in strength are LGBTQ plus and LGBTQ. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, LGBTQ rose above LGBT and has remained among the favorites for community terminology. And this is important. And the reason we ask it is because many of our clients come to us and they say, you know, it's changing. We see all this different terminology out there. What's best? And so instead of guess at it, we actually ask the community members what they prefer, what resonates with them. And of course, if you're using wrong terminology, that can go the wrong way. So what I would consider to be in the safe zone right now are LGBTQ and LGBTQ plus. LGBTQ plus this year has slightly edged out LGBTQ, but we consider them both pretty equal and both can be used. LGBT alone is dropping in favorability. I also want to call out the LGBTQIA plus, even though the longer acronym is used more frequently internationally, Latin America and Europe in particular. It's really not taken hold in North America and in the United States. Again, this is a USA survey. In Canada, when we ask about LGBTQ2S, when the number 2 and the S indicate two-spirit, that's actually pretty strong. So you really have to tailor your message to your market and be sensitive to not only the terminology that's preferred, but also trends over time. And just using the term gay is really not recommended. It really singles out one segment of our community to the exclusion of just about every other segment. And then we ask in terms of gender and generation. And the reason we do that, of course, is many of our marketers are focused on specific genders or generations with their products or services. And in this case, you can see LGBT is still pretty strong among the older community. But what we've seen is LGBTQ and LGBTQ plus growing in the acceptance among the older community. When we first started asking about the Q, wow, the older community really did not like it, but it's become more palatable and favorable for older people. So I think we can feel safe with LGBTQ and LGBTQ plus. You can see that LGBTQ plus, over on the right column by generation, 18 to 34, only 7% find LGBTQ plus unfavorable. That grows a little bit with Generation X and grows even a little bit more with the boomers. It's interesting to see this evolution of terminology. You can also see in terms of the term queer that cisgender lesbian and bi plus women find that more favorable than cisgender gay and bi plus men. But then it bounces back up among the transgender and non-binary participants. And then if you look in the lower corner, the unfavorable rating of using the term queer grows again by generation. So be careful with the term queer. We always like to tell our clients that if you're, a queer company or organization reaching the queer community, then by all means, that's fine. But if you're, a major airline or a retailer, using the term queer probably is not as good of an idea. So dig a little bit deeper into that, and you'll find probably the right match for your product or service. And we did touch on work-life balance. We work very closely with the National LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce, and we like to ask a few questions about work for them. So most of us are employed. Almost 20% are retired, but 62% work for an employer, full-time or part-time, and 13% are self-employed, and 7% own their own company. And that together, the 20% there is actually plus, actually, if you add the 5% gig work, 25% working on their own is actually very high. And there's a reason for that. Many of those who are employed did not find a very supportive environment at their job and decided to strike out on their own. And there are some reasons for self-employment. As you can see, in terms of number of years who've owned, that participants have owned or operated their own company among the business owners, the range is everything from 1 year to 20 years or more. We would be in the 30 years or more segment, which is pretty cool. And the by far the biggest driver is freedom to make my own business decisions and more live-work balance. The other driver, I think, is, they face discrimination when they work for somebody else, and particularly among the trans non-binary community. They just want it out, and they wanted to be able to strike out and do their own thing. And in terms of work-life balance, this is covering both those who are employed and who are working for themselves. 63% are feeling a bit too much stress and pressure from work. 48% feel that they're working too many hours in a typical week, and 46% feel too much work responsibilities to focus on friends and family. So I think when marketers can understand and address that with their products or services, I think that would really resonate. We also asked at the bottom there, I feel too much pressure from family responsibilities to focus on work. I was wondering if that might be an issue among those who are working or self-employed, and it's really not that bad. There seems to be a good work-life balance with people's with their home life. And in terms of leisure response activities, the reason we asked this is, again, just to sort of inform our clients and those who are studying this research. How do we relax? What do we do to kind of chill out? And Dave and I were talking before the presentation and observing that the group activities are really down over the past years, impacted heavily by COVID. We used to see, going to bars, going to parties, going to clubs, going to events, really, really high. And those have dropped considerably. And now it's more individual and more small group. Oops, sorry. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Dave to talk a little bit about how corporations best resonate with the community.
All right, thank you, Tom. So we ask these questions every year, and I think they're just really helpful questions. I can't say the numbers have really changed that much, but the questions attempt to understand the impacts of different outreach approaches when corporations partner with the community. And I think this is really important for media packs for both our media partners and our organizational partners. They're just really good statistics to use when you're trying to get corporate sponsorship. So again, 81% of the community thinks that more positively about companies that sponsor LGBT community organizations and events. 73% say they're more likely to purchase from a company that outreaches and advertises the LGBTQ community. 74%, I think, is more positive about companies that advertise in the LGBTQ community. So those are just three really good statistics for like media packs out there or organizational sponsorship packs. The last one I think is really interesting. Corporate presence at LGBTQ pride events is a positive for the community. And only 58%, that's still most, and that's high, and only 12% are negative about it. But it is less than the others. And there has been a little bit of backlash in the last few years about corporate sponsorship of pride. But it's interesting that may be turning around all of a sudden, considering some of the events that have been happening recently. We actually saw this to become up a little bit from the year before, but not great. But there are some people in the community that feel corporations, it's all about marketing. It's all about the gay dollar, that kind of thing, and that they really are resentful and they don't know why corporations are part of a civil rights movement. I come from an older generation. I need to say that in the older generation where we got absolutely no support from government, we turned to corporate America to fund our organizations and to provide us some support. And quite frankly, I think it worked. I think it really helped. But today there's been a little bit of a backlash, particularly from younger people about corporate support. I personally find that misguided. I think corporate, you don't turn on any friend who's willing to be a friend, especially when we're under attack. But nonetheless, I think this concern about corporate involvement in pride exists, and it's something that it needs to be viewed a little bit differently. All right, next slide. All right, the next question is, our activity, below are some activities that show support for the community, which best demonstrate that the company is really more authentic. So here, especially in today's world, taking political stands to really support both LGBT equality and transgender rights is the way in which corporations are really judged today, if they're being really authentic. And that makes a lot of sense about what's happening now. And then when corporations then get under attack because of their outreach efforts by the right wing, and then their response to that attack really can drive perception of the company. But the most important thing here is that the way to really impress the LGBT community is actually take a stand. Also, which is important, is actively in supporting your current LGBTQ employees. Having a 12-month LGBTQ outreach plan, not just during Pride, is a talking point that's being talked about a lot in our focus groups right now, is that they don't want to see corporations supporting us just during Pride and then running away in July. And they see that with corporations all the time, and that's becoming more and more offensive. Having out and visible LGBT leadership in a company is really important. And then donating money to local nonprofits is really important. But then again, interesting, the one that's least important, although again, very few negative here, only 7%, sponsoring a local Pride celebration. So again, if I looked at this and sort of had to rank it, it's about taking political stands for LGBTQ equality, actively supporting your employees, and then outreach, right? But you can't do authentic outreach unless you're actively supporting the community and your employees, because then it's not authentic. Next slide. All right, frequency of interaction within the LGBTQ media. We've asked this for a long time. Has your interaction with the LGBTQ media, and this is big media, newspapers, websites, email newsletters, social media, the whole thing, has it changed much in the last 12 months? And you can see for older generation, it seems really stable. For 35 plus, these numbers are really stable, but for age 18 to 34, it's actually increasing right now. But I guess the point is that we have a very big infrastructure of LGBTQ media, which again includes newspapers, includes websites, it includes social. There's all sorts of LGBTQ media options today, and LGBT people are touching base and looking at that media. I think somewhat of a problem is, again, being a little bit part of an older generation. Back in my day, the number of LGBTQ media sources was really quite limited, right? So any given single LGBT media could make a big impact. Today, LGBT media, just like all media, is much more fragmented across all sorts of sources and number of entities. So it becomes much more important to really start targeting your product and what are the demographics, your gender identity, the age group, ethnicity group within your product. And now you can match the media to some degree that matches your product demographic. So it's a much more complex world out there for media buyers, and I do appreciate that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about LGBTQ health. We've been tracking this for a little while. First of all, health insurance. The vast majority of us do have health insurance, so 94%. A little bit less for younger people. That's what we would expect. A little bit higher for older people, but the vast majority of us do have health insurance of some kind. And then we break this out by both gender identity and also by age, which I'll show a second. But I think the key is health is a funny thing. Health is really somewhat gender and age dependent. So it changes depending on your gender and gender identity or your age. But one thing that's really consistent within the LGBT community is the number one health concern, and it has been since we started doing this, is issues around mental health. I think unlike maybe other parts of the general population, mental health is something that the LGBTQ community is very, very in tune with. And it's a big, big concern for us across the board. Other things that are a big concern is getting to a healthy body weight. That's always been a big concern across the issues. Sleep issues are big across the board. And then it becomes a little bit more dependent on gender. So what I mean by that is like HIV, STDs, a little bit more important for gay and bi plus men, and issues around, access to gender affirming hormone therapy or gender confirmation surgery, more important to trans and non-binary participants. So gender identity matters a lot here. And on the next slide with age matters a lot too. So when you're looking at age groups, look how big it is: depression, anxiety, mental health concerns for age 18 to 34. It's huge. And it actually drops off in the LGBTQ community as people age. But for young people, mental health is really a big issue within our community. But again, then things change with age. When you're talking about younger issues around STDs, HIV, sleep, really big. But as you age, issues like dementia or Alzheimer's or cancer or some of these diseases that are just more common with older people increase. So age matters a lot as far as what people are concerned about. And now we're going to talk about a little bit about LGBTQ purchasing, and I'll go from this. I'll talk a little bit about it, and then we'll finish up and see if we can answer some questions. So we have asked questions about alcohol for a very long time. The reason we ask a lot of questions about alcohol is that alcohol provides a lot of sponsorship out there within the LGBTQ community, both of our events, but just general alcohol sponsorship in general. So most LGBTQ people, or 72%, indicated that they drank at least one alcohol drink in the last 90 days. Those percentages are somewhat higher for gay men and younger people, but not over the top. And this is a relatively stable list here. Overall, the LGBT percentage appeared to be somewhat higher than the general population alcohol consumption. So if you look at like the 2019 National Survey on Drug and Health, 70% of people aged 18 or older reporting that they drank alcohol in the past year. So there, 70% said they drank in the last year. For us, 72 said they drank in the last 90 days. I mean, it's apples and oranges a little bit because of the time frame, but it's close. But we're probably just a little bit higher, but probably not excessively higher. This I find interesting. So we did a little bit about alcohol consumption here. So compared to the 2022 results, actually results pointed to somewhat weaker consumption of alcohol coming out of COVID, but what really dropped was beer and wine consumption in 2023, while the rest of the spirits like vodka or whiskey actually held somewhat stable. So I thought that was interesting. We did see a drop in beer and wine consumption. I actually did a little bit of research from some other like Gen Pop. That surprised me. I thought it was maybe something that was specific to our community, but apparently it's not. That there has been a little bit of a drop in beer and wine consumption since those COVID days. But anyway, I think, again, this is sort of across all our research. When we do research at CMI, we do not look at the LGBT community generally in one step. Like we're all not marching in the same direction. We all have differences by gender identity, age, and ethnicity, and we try to break that out as much as we can. Now, I'm not going to go over a lot of this. I'm just going to throw a couple of slides out as we start to finish up. But I just want to say that in the report, if you download it, there's a lot more information and more than we're covering in this report about all sorts of topics. But I realize that we probably have a clothes manufacturer out here, and then we probably have some alcohol companies out here, and we probably have some electronic companies out here. And I'm not going to go into all the particulars and all this stuff. But I just want to say there's a lot of information in the report and that you should download it, and there may be additional information for your specific industry. Next slide. I do think entertainment purchases, though, is interesting, and none of this should surprise you, but this has so changed over the last 5 years. We've become a community that is largely getting our information through streaming services, being streaming television, subscription radio. You know, cable television has really plummeted. I think it's really interesting when you look at cable television that only 10% of our 18 to 34-year-olds say that someone in their household is purchasing cable television. And that's up to 47% for 55 plus. So big gap there. But, the cable television, basic cable television has been plummeting. But it's really something the age 55 ups are doing. Next. And then we also have a lot about travel here. I'm not going to go over all this because I realize most people on this particular call are not in the travel industry, but I'm going to have Tom just flip through some of these. I just want to say there's a lot on the travel industry in this, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it as Tom flips through these slides. If you go to our website, there's a lot of information about how COVID has changed, but I'll talk about it a little bit. Tom, you can go one more. And one more. And that's a good place to start with COVID. When I look at the travel industry, we do a lot of work within the travel industry, and I think the LGBT community, percentage-wise, was actually hit harder by COVID and travel than actually the general population. I think one of the reasons is that COVID, for whatever reason, the United States became very political, and we are very liberal. And I think that sort of changed maybe our perceptions about safety and how we should be responding. But what I would say is that coming out of COVID right now, I'm going to say this past year, the last 12 months has been really coming out of COVID, our travel patterns have exploded, as they have for the general population. But when I'm looking at, we do a lot of research for specific destinations, so a specific city, a specific state. And if I look at our research in 2019, and we asked back then, have you traveled? Where did you go in the last 12 months? Or did you come to our city in the last 12 months? And I look at the research right now and ask the same question. I've done this for so many destinations. Have you traveled in the last 12 months? The 2023 statistics for every destinations I've done across the board is exceeding the 2019 statistics. So I think the LGBTQ community went through a really pattern. We were actually underperforming for a couple of years, and we're sort of exploding out of it right now. So our travel patterns right now are exceptional. Our travel patterns right now are far higher than they were in 2019. On the other hand, that is particularly true of the younger generations. I'm still seeing some reluctance to travel for age 65 plus. So I think that is interesting, is that people 65 plus still have a little bit more safety concerns, but that 18 to 54 group, we're traveling really strongly right now.
Yeah, and I think that wraps us up. I forgot that I had that on. That's kind of cute. Anyway, so thank you, Dave. That's yet again a really beautiful synopsis of not only this survey, but when possible, drawing some comparisons to the previous work we've done. The 17th Annual LGBTQ Community Survey is really called out by the first word, the 17th Annual. Really, there's been no larger or longer term study on the community. So it's really become quite a resource for the overall, not only the community itself, but everybody who serves us, whether it's government, nonprofits, universities, or corporations, destinations, etc. So we're really proud of that. Sorry?
I was going to say something. I'm sorry. I thought you were good.
No, it's real. We're really proud of the legacy of this study, and we push through it every year. Dave, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we haven't tracked this since day one, but within our panel, we have a little thing like, when did you join the panel? And we've now been tracking it long enough that we now have panel members that have been taking our surveys for over 20 years. So I think that's just amazing. Probably some of our people have been longer. We just didn't ask that question for that at some point. But I love that we have panel members that have been with us for 20 years, and we've been able to, look at these results for 20 plus years and see how things have changed.
Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So we have run out of time. Please take note of our email addresses at the top, tom@cmi.info, david@cmi.info, and please do dig into our website, also cmi.info, and you'll find a wealth of information there. In the chat, I've also popped up the download link for the full report. Please do download that and dig into it. If you have any questions as a result, by all means, please get in touch with us. Some specific questions are coming in, but I think we'll defer those to direct email because they probably don't apply to everybody. But happy to answer or try to answer just about everything that that comes our way. So thank you very much for your participation. Dave, any final words?
No, I'm good. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to outreach us to us.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.